go. Welcome, folks, to the Open Humans Community Meeting on July 28th, 2020. Our agenda is, I was going to give a brief update on work I'm doing to make quantified flu symptom tracking more generic, and also invite feedback on what would be a great next priority for me or us to work on with Open Humans. Paula has some flow notes on the quantified flu sign-up process that she'd like to share, which are very welcome. Some of that might be specific to quantified flu, and some of it might be like more about how Open Humans works and thinking about how we can improve that. Bastian wonders whether we should revisit our schedule for community calls, which went to weekly, and maybe in part due to increased interest during the pandemic, and we can see whether we want to continue weekly, go monthly, or something in between, or whatever. And then I see a note here about finding some time for a UI session, I guess kind of related to Paula's feedback. Is that something you added, Bastian?
Yeah, I added this because I think we had discussed during one of our earlier calls, we should set aside maybe like a proper slot for doing this, where people then come prepared, not only Paula, but the rest of us as well, about what we think. That might be useful.
Okay, so it sounds good. And folks are welcome to bring in a new topic as it occurs to them on the fly. So the first thing was me updating on making quantified flu more generic. So there's interest in using this ability to track symptoms to add and customize the symptom tracker report so that you can be tracking something else that's relevant to you. And so I've been doing that, and some of that's moving like hard-coded symptom models into sort of a generic report setup. Right now, the way I'm imagining and starting to build out the flow is that there's an existing report setup that everyone starts with as a default, and then people can have the capacity to copy and customize that. And the thought there is that the process is going to help people start with some sort of default and then tweak it. And then maybe from there, be able to share their setup so that somebody else can use their setup, that sort of stuff. And also, we want to encourage people to reuse existing symptoms rather than like come up with the new symptom, that sort of like, so here's the symptoms that already exist, and really encouraging the flow to converge and reuse existing symptoms. So that's where I am. I've made some progress on that, and I'm hoping to finish it off so that it's usable. Yeah, I hope that's useful for people, because I think I recall some people being like, well, it'd be nice if I could track X, Y, or Z this way. So that will open that up. Any thoughts? Just kind of like, we'll see it when it happens. From there, I think
I can just give briefly the update of the public symptom reports, which now the list is a bit more useful. Maybe I can I share the screen? No, Matt, can you quickly?
I've got to probably enable that, and it should be enabled now.
Okay, yep, there is something coming up. There we go. So now the list, which you hopefully can see, is a bit more useful, because now it actually shows you not just the member ID, but it shows you like from over which dates they have recorded, how many reports they made during the time in total, how often they were sick. So you can now actually go ahead and find the interesting bits of data you want to look at, instead of hoping that there's more than one report. And you can also see the data source. So for example, this one looks very interesting, 49 sick incidents, so basically half the time, and then you can just click on it and you go back to the view you already know. But it's a bit more useful now. It makes the exploration a bit more fun, because now we can see like the comments and everything, and you can actually browse the data in an easier way. And that's like, basically this came out of the last week's call, where we discussed like how it's a bit hard to find data, and Basil, who is like getting all the credit for this, it's not me, he, like the intern working with me, sat down and was like, oh yeah, I can do this. And this morning we deployed it, and now you can browse the data in a more nicer way.
I'm kind of, wow. I mean, I hadn't even seen that page, or let alone that somebody has that extensive. I haven't browsed this data at all.
Yeah, me neither. And like I just like saw it now literally on the call. I was like, let me look at the page. And I was like, it takes a while to load because like now it's like it's JavaScript that loads the table because you need to go through all data sets to actually see how many incidents there are and so on. So it takes a few seconds, but it's incrementally building from the top down the table. So it takes a bit longer to load the whole thing, but
I mean, couldn't that be done on the back end and loaded really quickly?
yeah, but
It's
it's not there right now on the back end.
okay.
So he
I
passed the
know.
JSON which we expose and
Yeah, I feel kind of bad because I'm like, I'm pretty sure that would have been a really fast database query and just like spat out into the template right away. But it sounds like he was like, you know what, I know how to do this in a super inefficient way,
yeah.
but I can do it. Uh, and I wish I'm trying to resist like not doing what I'm focused. Like I want to tear away and actually explore this, but then I also want to add these flexible symptom reports because I keep talking about it and I just want to get that done. If anybody wants to explore it and look at it and like talk about it, that's really, really welcome.
I just looked at it and saw my heart rate data hasn't updated. So now I'm like, what?
Is it Apple Watch? Because you have to kind of actively do that.
It's Fitbit.
Let's see. Well, has anyone added Garmin, by the way? I noticed Garmin was out as in Tech
Let me
World
see.
News.
Yeah,
Anyway,
there's at least two people. It's still loading the rest of the list, but I see two people. So Carolina did not do the work in vain. At least for two people, it made a difference.
yeah. As background, Garmin got taken down by hackers, and the data's not got. The data didn't leak, but it was like
It got
encrypted.
encrypted.
Yeah. Their data got encrypted and held hostage, and they were being asked for $10 million or something, and I haven't seen if that's changed or they're just sitting on it, and it's like it's basically Garmin's down. Yeah. Well, that's super cool. So, but I do want to emphasize, if anyone like sits there and browses data and says like, hey, this one looks really interesting, there's the Slack channel, quantified flu, totally welcome to start conversations about it, because I think that's like a great way to get somebody else interested. And eventually someone notices it and says, oh, I have data analysis skills, or I can look at it and come up with other theories. Those conversations only happen if you talk. So so please be welcome to share any like interesting observations.
Is there a way to download all of the public data with a button?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There, I can put the link in. Matt wrote these very nice bash one-liners to get you a CSV of all the data.
Well, they worked on my computer.
I tried to, it works. And I think my two undergrad students used it as well to get all the data. So at least we have 3 independent replications.
Okay, yeah, it's kind of like a button, but it requires using a shell to paste the bash one-liner. Because there's APIs with the JSON data for each of the different report endpoints, but if people just want like one batch of everything, then the bash one-liner does it.
Got it.
Yeah, so our next agenda item was like next Open Humans feature thing to work on. Like what would be of biggest value or interest. And I had 2 vague ideas of like what I could focus on next. And one was I keep talking about it would be nice if we had a wiki that was baked into the site so that documentation and about all sorts of things could be much more easily updated and maintained. And so like random ideas of what that means is some of that is like API documentation, but some of it's also stuff like new data sources or how to use an instrument or like just about anything you can think of that we're trying to kind of capture as knowledge during our discussions and chats. right now we don't have a really easy way to kind of write that up so that somebody else knows about it. So that's one idea. The other is to talk about, Bastien created the exploratory site where people can share notebooks, so they can like put the notebook and display it and share it and try to sort through and search for notebooks. And it's a problem that's on another site. And so another potential thing to work on would be to bring the notebooks into a more native representation within the Open Humans website itself. And some of this was the evolution of notebooks and the Jupyter servers. Is like, it was experimental at first, and was this going to be like a really important, powerful thing? And I think that it's of enough interest that now we have people who are like, well, I'm interested, but it's just like so confusing, the user flow and stuff, that it might be worth to bringing the notebooks in with a native representation on the main site. But I want to open it up for opinions on both those things and other things.
I like both of them, obviously, but like a third one that like I think came up often is like the data types, which are half implemented. I think getting those completely done in combination with the Jupyter notebooks would be really nice.
Okay, finishing the data types. And this is half implemented in the sense that like, it's possible to specify them when the data is deposited, but it's not possible for projects to say, give me this data, like invite sharing of a particular data type instead of a particular data source. And there might be other like pieces that just like haven't been smoothed out.
And like related to this, I think once it's completely implemented, to have like on OpenHumans itself, like an upload button for upload whatever file with the data type. Because I know we have like the external like upload.openhumans.org website, but again, it's like hidden on a different website, which is, I think it's not even made public yet. Officially, it's still like a non-reviewed project, so it doesn't even show up anywhere. But if this was possible to use to say people, here you can upload whatever, and then you can start your notebook right away, then it eases the pain for people that have like non-specific data types. So like Gary's one button data, it's like just a click away to upload it, and now everyone can use the same notebook. I think this would be.
This also connects to the wiki in a way, because right now we have definitions of data types that is like a wiki-like-ish thing, which anybody can create their own data type description and stuff. And, you know, like a wiki, it's like trying to imitate a wiki style of free form. People can create these things, and maybe a wiki again is the answer there. Yes. Okay, good point to bring my awareness back to that. And it's often a good idea to finish partly done work than it is to start new work. Any other opinions?
For the data types, the heavy lifting of like coming up with a structure for the data types we've done, and I know we spend a lot of time thinking about them. So I think we can now finish the last bit for like actually making it useful after we spend so much time discussing it, setting it up.
That sounds, I didn't even know that you could upload your own data. So this is good info.
Yeah, that's one of the things, is like the tension between building things in like a modular external app that puts things into Open Humans versus baking it into the main site. The external app is like harder for people to find and know about, but also like decouples maintenance. So good point.
Not only this, I think it's also nice because it forces us to eat our own dog food. Like all the things we do on Open Humans uses our own APIs, so we know exactly like what's missing, or like if we can't make it work, then it's a bad sign that we need to improve the API.
It's nice to have the position to say like everything we did, anyone else could have built and done. Like there's nothing that like the whole notebook structure and the Jupyter structure, like all of those we can say like, or like the exploratory or quantified flu, or like all of those are using things that you can use too. So that's always nice. But at the same time, the usability goes down when it's not baked into the main site. But yeah, upload.openhumans.org is this data uploader tool. It exists.
That connects to the Open Jupyter Notebooks, Juno Notebooks.
there's not a strong connection there, and that's part of Bastian's criticism. The notebooks in general don't have a strong connection to either data source or data type without someone specifying like filter my data on this aspect. And so also adding, like improving a sort of an easy to use modular library for, at least in Python, so that people can quickly load data. I don't know how to make R stuff, so that's separate, but in theory, notebooks could be filtering or looking for a file based on data type rather than a data source. And this is like really abstract. It's like someone who hasn't tried to manage these flows, but it's like the question of how do you, I think James Littlejohn has observed that this is actually like a really hard problem. I feel like, how do you determine what, like which data has what you need, like which file somewhere like has the information you need and is formatted and what format it has and that sort of stuff. Okay. I think that this gets really technical, so I think we should move on from like the open feature discussion, unless we have like more thoughts or feedback on which things excite people or they really like to see. Then I think we can move to, Paula, would you like to go next with the flow stuff? Because that might also turn into like observations of things that could be improved.
Yep, that sounds good. I can share my screen.
I think so.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to actually, I think, maybe jump to the bottom of this and then see if it makes sense to go up. This is, after going through the flow, what I expected to see. And then the other slides are what I observed with notes of, like, for example, I added yellow, something that I expected, but something else happened, and then green is something very positive. So I did that throughout the entire flow. So I just want to jump to this because this is kind of what I was expecting along the way. I saw this page. I understood that this is the main button to click. It was the only button to click. Then I went to a different page that was this and this combined. And I actually got a little, I mean, I understand what needs to happen because I'm familiar with the site, but I think as a new user, I wouldn't have been aware of what to click next. There's 4 orange buttons to click, maybe 5, depending if I had something connected or not. And I didn't know the order of which I needed to do that. So I went to the bottom and did the authorized project, but I guess that it makes more sense to go through and add your data first. And then maybe go to this page. And then after this page, I was expecting that I would sort of be done in a way. I would be like, okay, I did all the authorization, I added my data, and then I sort of expect to see my data. So I expected to see something like this, where I would see the data I added, which was my Fitbit heart rate data. And then sort of below it, I would see the symptoms. And I was like, okay, this is what really quantified flu is this layer of on top of your heart rate, and you get to see these cool visualizations. And I would have motivation to add the 3 different components that are listed on the one of the other pages, which is the today's symptoms, the sickness event, and then the reminder. And then the learn more could be kind of learn more about this particular project and all the ins and outs and the public data sources. So I think this is what I was expecting, kind of the project page, the add data, the authorize, and then almost immediately see my data and have like that intrinsic motivation to add more stuff to it. So I wrote down, like, this is very obvious to me, kind of click on this button. I understand that I need to progress through this project. And I won't spend too much time because I'm not sure, like, yeah, I'll go over a couple. This was really helpful, the first sentence. I sort of understood what this project was. I think that there's a few things about analyzing past data, which I thought was great. Maybe there's another sentence of how you could add reminders. I kind of understood that this is the main button to click. I got a little distracted by all of this other information, which I think is relevant, but I wanted to click on data and I couldn't click on data. So I don't know if that makes sense to have it in other different tabs. This was great to see. I sort of wasn't expecting this page. I was sort of expecting to go in and authorize my project. But given that I saw this page, I liked the visualizations. I sort of liked the high level. I was expecting this button to be higher up. Just something that if I'm going through connecting project, I expect to kind of go through and finish that funnel. And so I would have liked to maybe have that button here. But otherwise, this page was nice. I liked it. This was super clear. No problems here, no confusion. This is where I already mentioned, I got a little confused by what I needed to do on this page. There's a lot of buttons to click on and a lot of links. And I wasn't sure about the order of operation. I got a little confused by the additional comments here. I wasn't sure what, I think this was mentioned last time, is what does available mean? Or what does shared mean? In the context of that, reality is that it's your personal data until you authorize to share it publicly anonymously, essentially. I didn't get that. I kind of got a little, I mean, I know what to expect, but I did find a little hesitation here. And then I found a little confusing, you will receive these as emails. I wasn't sure what these was referring to. I guess it's reminder, which is good to know. I just wasn't clear about what that meant. I thought maybe my data. And so it took me a couple of seconds to figure out how to navigate this particular page. I saw a lot of buttons here. Wasn't sure which button I needed to click on. I assume that this is the most important because it's bigger, but they're all somewhat equally weighed. And not knowing really how my data has been used so far, I just didn't know in what context I was adding this information. So I went in here. This was super easy to use. Loved it. I could move it along. When I was adding that other symptom, and Nad, you already touched on this, about being able to add that in more permanently, so you could have that drop down. I was expecting that once I added something that I would have this auto line generated for me. And I wasn't clear what this, I didn't see a date anywhere. So I wasn't sure if I was reporting it for today, for the time. So that was a little, I was expecting that I could change the date, but I wasn't sure if maybe that would be the next page, but that was a little unclear. And I have lots of comments on this page. So this part right here goes into that question before where I thought I already authorized the data. So I thought I already made that agreement. I saw the time zone and I was wondering how I could change that. This was super easy to understand, a super intuitive chart, I think, just very beautifully aesthetic. I looked at the bottom and I was confused by, I had 2 entries and I wanted to change them. I didn't sort of have the flexibility to edit or delete or modify. And then I was sort of like, okay, great. I saw this. I now want to add more, and I didn't know how to add more from this page. So I kind of thought I'd go back and click on the logo, quantified flu, and it took me back to this. So I was like, oh, we have past reports. Okay, that's a new button. Got it. And that makes me think of that this is my main dashboard, that this is what I'm really caring to monitor, but this button looks less important than these buttons. So I wasn't sure. And then this was interesting because I thought add a sickness event to analyze was actually going to be the same as reports and symptoms. So I was like, okay, I'm now going to add a historical event where report symptoms is today, and then this is historical, and then this was a very different page. So that was I was expecting that I would have the same kind of modification trackers, but I was like, okay, this is a different format, this is a different data point, I need to treat it that way. And then it sort of, this was the kind of way that I expected. So super, I'm not sure if that was welcome or not, but I decided to share anyways.
No, that's really great. And I think you've like identified a lot of the pain points that I think many of us here have also already identified in the past and have not yet found a good solution around it. I know that Gary, Matt, and I had like a discussion about what I need to click, especially during the authorization phase. And
I think that authorization panel can be improved. It's definitely a pain point because of the modularity of like, did you already have that data connected or not? And does a project need every data, or is it sort of an optional, like if you add it, it can do more? And like, how do we ask projects to even report that and then represent that? But that said, there's improvements on that authorization panel that like it could say, it could always open in a new tab and say like, if you'd like to add one of these, then open it in a new tab. Having the authorization panel sort of live update after you added it somewhere else is more tricky, but like that's theoretically possible. Yeah, it's tricky because it's like a project kind of relies on some existing data that uses other features and sources to add. But I think it's really good to have the feedback on the authorization panel because that's not specific to quantified flu. That's something that other projects, like Morgan wants to build a project that invites people to like add their ECG the EG data. Sorry, I'm and so like you want to invite that data addition, it might be like a modular separate thing. And how do we help users through that process?
This connects to this earlier conversation we were having and about mental models. And Paula, that is it's great to just be how explicit you were able to make your experience. I mean, I think that pays off also to go back and look at it again and think. And I feel like it confirms the fact that actually the mental model that you have to effectively and confidently use the system is actually complex, a bit complex, because you have an account on Open Humans, so you're authorizing Open Humans to do some things. Then you have authorized projects that have some different things that are connected to, and then you have data sets that you have, in a sense, added, but there's actually a kind of overlap with an authorization process in that adding data. And so it's very easy to kind of get confused because, so there might even be, as we go through this, a way, maybe it might not be possible for people to be confident about it unless that mental model is explicitly described somewhere. And just like, even though it's kind of a pain and it's against the best practice of like easy consumer products, like, you just want it to work and not have people think, and maybe there's like a little diagram and here's Open Humans and here's the data sets and here's the projects and here's you. And, it's a teaching thing. I don't know if you could do it in like 3 minutes.
It's always it's like awful when you start a new platform and it's like, let me guide you through our tour and like do item 1 and do item 2.
But it's like the model. What do you need for the model? Like Stephen brought this up too in an earlier conversation with me about some stuff that's confusing on quantified self. But it's like when you start to learn a board game, there are just 2 or 3 things you have to know. Like the point of this game is to take all the cards and it lasts an hour or, whatever. The point of this game is to bankrupt your opponents. Like, even though everyone wants to just start the games by playing, it actually, there's a few things that you probably really need to know. And maybe we just haven't figured out, like, what are those 3 things that somebody has to have in their head? And it might change some language. To authorize, I think, is obviously a problem here. Like the word authorize might be just a bit confusing.
Add project or confirm project, because I after poking around the website, I sort of understood the hierarchy. Sort of understood that Open Humans is this kind of shell that holds all of this content, and then you can choose which data sources to connect, and that becomes kind of your profile. And then you add a project, which is sort of this part of this ecosystem, but it's like the second layer. And I started to understand that a little bit, but got a little bit confused with the color changes. So I went to quantified self and the color changed to blue. I was like, okay, that's a different project. But then I went back to orange and I was like, am I back to open humans? And then I went back to blue and I was like, okay, wait, I'm back to, so the switch between the colors for me, those signaled changes, I got a little lost because I thought I entered quantified flu, but I know that's part of it. So the colors could interchange. So that was just, as I was going through the flow, I was like, the button changed to blue, now it's orange. But I learned that the button should be always orange for confirmation.
Should we try to have a focused UI session? That was one of the other sort of agenda, and it seems like a natural thing to move to, because I think that we're having a lot of really great ideas, and
yeah, I think it would be good if we could take like an hour just to go through each of those slides, basically. I think there's already like a lot of ideas that we can just gain from like going through each of those slides and thinking like, what could we do differently to make it easier and less confusing?
Well, I liked Gary's suggestion of like, what is the mental model? Like, what are the core mental model things that are important to communicate, because that creates a structure around not just some sort of demo thing, but also the language, consistent language around communicating that within that model. So,
and also I think just, I mean, yes, we can move on. Just one thing I want to say, it's to me already interesting that you started on the Open Humans website, which I think we often assume people don't start out of. So I think like the whole quantified flu workflow was designed for people that go to quantifiedflu.org right away, and they've maybe never been to Open Humans before, which like has like all of a sudden a completely different mental model, because people will not know anything about Open Humans, and ideally we assume they might also never know. It just like displays the stores data, but it tries to like make the barrier to entry as low as possible. So there's like two very different groups of users somehow we are trying to cater to at the same time, which I think like will be interesting for our like ideas as well.
That's a really
this
good
has
point.
been a
I didn't think of
tension.
that.
Yeah, this has been a tension since we started, of like user flow, of like, are you starting with A and then signing in, like, and then just adding a connection to B, but your primary interest is A. So it's technically what's happening under the hood is that quantified flu is you're signing into it using your Open Humans account. So it's like sign in with Facebook or whatever. You're signing in using the Open Humans account. So to get into it, it's like you go to the Quantified Flu webpage, and then you're sent back to Open Humans to sign in with Open Humans, and then you're sent back to Quantified Flu. So if you started on Open Humans, it's kind of like, oh, Facebook supports the something app that logs in with Facebook, so I'll go check that out. Oh, now I'm sent back to Facebook to log back in, and now I'm sent back. So you can kind of see like, and we're struggling with like, what is the right way to do that, or like, what is the right order? It's
I mean, one simple mistake we made is like the connect button should be already the OAuth sign-in link in Open Humans, because if you click now on the login button for Quantified Flu on Open Humans, it takes you to the main page of Quantified Flu, which you could in principle skip. You could use the correct login URL right away, which has the client ID. So you never go to Quantified Flu in the first place until you have like finalized the sign-in. But that's just like an example of like where.
And I've pointed out to people that they can do that as a hack to skip that step in flow.
I think the UI session has all we need at this point to dramatically improve this experience. I think it's really that, like, there's a lot here that just, if we acted on the latent knowledge that's in this conversation, you know, it wouldn't be perfect, but it would really help.
Do we want to plan on that as a community call? Do we want to try to do it right away, or give ourselves a couple weeks, or?
I think we should use a community call for it, right? We have this call and it's really interesting. You know, it's not like we have 30 people on the call and we have to do a subcommittee or something. So
yeah, we're already sort of doing it.
Yeah.
I liked, but I really liked sort of the high level idea of like, what is the mental model of open humans? And so I would start sort of with that as the question. Now that we have this sort of lived experience of like what it felt like to try to do it, and we could step back maybe and say like, okay, what did we not understand? Or like, what did someone not understand at first that was like, oh, once I understood that, it became easier.
And I think this idea of the expectation, it was also really good in those slides. So we could learn from that. I put some notes in our common notes area, just stuff that came up in our quick little conversation. So please feel free to add something you were thinking didn't get added.
Right, because I kind of want to take long discussions on all of these questions, but I also feel like I want to set aside a call where we do that without. So let's plan on. So this kind of merges with the other agenda item, which is wondering whether we should change the schedule of community calls. And my instinct is to declare next week's community call to be this UI session. And that conflicts a little bit with Bastian's suggestion that we should turn this into a monthly meeting. So are there any thoughts?
I would say it doesn't really conflict. So I would say we can do it next week for the UI thing, and then we go to monthly. Because I think like often it's like what will we actually talk about? We always come up with stuff that we can somehow talk about. But if we have like a bit more focused topics every month, it might also have more people joining. So
it would also give me a whole month to try to do something in response to the UI session, which I kind of like. And then I can come back after, and I'll have like a goalpost of coming back with improvements. Does that sound good to, oh.
Would the Thursday one happen still every week, or is that going to change also?
Well, I had an idea about that, which is I was thinking that maybe could go to bi-weekly. And if we did that, we could have, because I think if we want to keep a self-research group going, it probably has to be more than once a month. And it's a nice group and things are happening. And I also think some people from QS community who haven't been part of it might kind of join over time. But maybe every week, you know, might be a little much.
I think we'll discuss on Thursday. That sounds fine to me. So we'll see how this Thursday's looks and if folks are happy with that. I think for this Tuesday's calls, I think it sounds like our plan is to meet next week and then shift to maybe first Tuesdays of the month thereafter.
And the self-research, I don't know whether we should okay, we can discuss it on Thursday, but I think even weekly, I mean, as it's pretty informal, it's like it actually can turn into just people chatting about related things about self-research. And I think there's a value in having like more space for just chatting and less for like, now people need to present, which if we do it every week, there's some more space for just brainstorming basically.
That's great, yeah.
I do like how the Thursday ones, everyone gives a snippet. Like there's a round circle, and Matt and Bastian, you ask everyone, what's the small update? And then everyone has then a chance to do like 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how many people volunteered. I think that guidance is really helpful rather than have someone speak for half an hour, because that seems more of like a presentation.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, I felt bad about sucking up an hour like that. I really like those check-ins. Okay,
well, a very interesting project. I liked hearing it. So.
I kind of want to get back to the UI discussion. I mean, or the user experience discussion, since we've like ironed out the agenda plan, because there's questions around the word authorize. Is it okay if we go back to that? Like.
Yeah, I think like we can use the last 10 minutes to get started in preparation for next week.
I'm like, I shouldn't be thumbs up because I'm like, like, you know, receiving feedback is always like, It's like, but I meant. um, the word authorized in the process. So one of the experiences that Paula has pointed to is like, what is being shared? So one of the questions was about permission to send messages and like and receiving those as emails, and that has to do with like the project can send messages to members which are received by the members as an email in their mailbox without the project receiving their email. But authorizing the project to receive access to data does not render that data public. And an additional complexity is that projects could be requesting data that is potentially identifiable. They may receive it without that identity attached, but the language has been sort of made ambiguous around this so that it's trying to be specific about this is what you're sharing with the project without making a claim that it's anonymous, but you may feel that that data is sufficiently anonymous. But like there's that nuance there of like the data you share might theoretically be re-identifiable. But yeah, the word authorized and like when it's being shared and whether that data is public. What's the feeling? Like, so the word authorized is wrong, is the sense.
I thought that it's confusing only because there's different things that it means. And also people carry around, if they're at all technical, they carry around in the back of their mind this OAuth kind of mental model where authorized means authorize, you know, open humans to read your data off an API, which is not what it necessarily means. So
that is what it means in this context. Or it's authorizing quantified flu to read the data off of open humans.
That's the only thing it means, then I just got confused. So authorize isn't used except to mean authorize a data set for open humans. It's not used in the context of authorizing a project to read the data. Or that only happens in the context of a project, I guess. Or
it's authorizing quantified flu to read your data in open humans from Fitbit or from like
but I wouldn't authorize open humans to read the data without authorizing quantified flu. Like if I'm only authorizing the data in the context of joined a project I've joined. Is that right?
You're authorizing
how my mental model is like a bit of a tangle.
Like the data is stored in open humans and you're managing it and you're authorizing quantified flu to use it according to whatever uses it says it's going to use.
But how did my data get into open humans?
You used, like say you use the Fitbit tool, you authorize that tool to put the data into open humans.
But does that mean, okay, here's where my mental model is confused. Does that mean I've authorized open humans and I've authorized quantified flu? Or I've authorized quantified flu and that authorizes open humans because quantified flu is nested underneath?
I think that, the first step was creating the Open Humans account in which you authorized Open Humans to manage data that you put into it. And there's like the terms of use, which say stuff like it's not going to be shared with anybody unless you say that you want it to be shared with them. It's not going to be used for things. So it's fair to say that yes, at some point an authorization of Open Humans occurred. But yeah, it sounds like we're having sort of complexity around like what that language means. At the point at which someone's
a different level, maybe that's the level of quantified flu open human. So let's assume there's only one like authorization that takes place. And it's an authorization for the system, the data storage system, to read my data off of some data source. And so then maybe where I'm confused is the system quantified flu, or is it open humans, or is it both? Can I move my authorization in a sense from one to the other? And what's that called? Is that called joining?
I'm going to let Bastian take over because I feel like maybe somebody needs to use different words to unpack this, unless he doesn't want to.
I'm trying to understand also what Gary is referring to? Like, could we maybe just like have a screen share of like the sign up page or like the authorization page? I think this would maybe help to, maybe Paula, if you can just like, you made the screenshot, that might be.
Yeah, of that thing.
Yeah.
But part of the problem is just to say, like, I mean, I think I'm just exposing my own confusion, but part of the problem is, doesn't it look different if you've joined or haven't joined? But maybe it doesn't.
If
I remember I ran into this when I joined.
So I think if you've signed in before and it asks you to do it again, there's like a banner on the top saying you have signed in before, something along those lines.
Yeah, some of that's a bug in the OAuth 2 library. You shouldn't have to reauthorize a project you already authorized. But so if you haven't joined Quantified Flu before, and then this is what you see. And unfortunately, if you have before and we've lost our token, you have to do this again. Let's ignore the second one, which is like kind of dumb and you shouldn't have to authorize again. But like when you do the first time, this is what you should see, or something like this, which informs you that you're granting Quantified Flu these permissions to send you emails via OpenHumans, so they don't get your email address, but they can still use it to send you emails. And then permission to access these data from these sources whenever you have them connected. So if you already have them connected, it says connected. And if it's not already connected, it has a little button there saying you can connect that. And then authorization to add data into your account. And so now Quantified Flu can act as a data source as well.
So, okay, good. So this is one part of my confusion, and I think this shows it really clearly. When I authorize the project, I'm signing on, in a sense, to the terms of service. But when I connect the Fitbit, then I'm taking specifically my Fitbit data and linking it to my authorization of OpenHumans, or my sign on to the OpenHumans terms of service, right? So I mean, I don't want to confuse other people, but I think that there's like two different things going on here. There's connected data and there's authorized and quantified flow. And I think it's a little bit hard to keep that completely clear in a user's head.
I think that if the button, I don't particularly find the wording so confusing, but I can see it from your perspective, Gary. If the button said join project, I would understand that I'm joining on behalf of OpenHumans. Like, I have other projects that I could join as well, which is part of the ecosystem. And also maybe if the button was actually blue, maybe. I'm not sure about whether that makes sense, but it's specifically to this project. But though at the end it's adding it to OpenHumans, so then I get confused between the button colors.
It's occurring on the OpenHumans website, so the button color is reflecting the OpenHumans branding stuff.
Yep. But you're saying that it's the door to get into Quantified Flu?
It could also say join Quantified Flu at the bottom. It should be treated as an authorization in the sense that at some point somebody has to be agreeing to the terms of a project or research study. And so this is in a sense, the process does involve agreeing to whatever this project or activity is planning to do. And for projects that are run on the website, they present a page before this, which describes what they're going to do. And for projects like this, which have an OAuth 2 separate website, it's assumed or believed that they're going to present sort of what they're going to do on their own site, like terms of use stuff, so that it doesn't have to be baked into the flow on OpenHumans. But maybe it shouldn't be that way. Maybe there should be like, here's the project's own description of what it's planning to do that should be represented. It's one of those tensions there of like, if you give people too much information in their flow, they don't want to have to click through page after page after page, or they won't read it or something like that.
I think we're really well set up for our hour. Like, okay. I really do. I think it's like I just went to join 23andMe, and then, you know, I found that intermediate page, and there's a get started login, and it says authorized 23andMe uploader on Open Humans, right? So that's that thing that you're talking about there for that connection. I just think somehow like these elements, that we probably could find a way to hierarchically and simply describe these elements. And it might even be necessary. We might actually have to build a little bit of a model for people to understand that there's, because like you're saying, it actually is, the actual reality of the thing is kind of complex. It's not that simple. So you don't want to simplify it so far that people make like agree to share their data publicly, for instance, where they didn't realize what was
and they get
going
confused.
on. And they
Yeah, and this page, this process is a great one to dwell on, because it's like, this isn't about quantified flu. This is about like, how do activities run on Open Humans, and how does a person understand what is going on?
And activities are what projects are called now, right?
So yeah, I tried to transition our language, and it's just like kind of crappily half implemented. But we initially called these things projects, and then when people started doing self-research projects, I felt like the word project was confusing, and activity was something, what we would call something that had this support for other users rather than like a purely self-research project. So I use the word activity more specifically to designate these projects that involve permissions of other people, or you get group project, group activity.
Right.
But yeah, the language there, and then trying to make it consistent on the website is a lot of work, but it's nice to have a lot of discussion on what the ideal language is and then move towards it.
Yeah, I definitely think like it gets really confusing if you start at too low a level of the problem and try to sort out like even like my introducing, oh, there's a problem with authorized. It's really confusing because we're not even, so I think raising the level here and saying like, what are the key things that the user has to understand, assuming they're new, and then you can kind of hide some if you want, like later.
Yeah.
I think it is interesting, different data sources that you're connected are not just specific to this particular project. So like I have Fitbit and I'm using it in the personal Juno project. So that's in the realm of Open Humans, and I can connect that data to these external projects or internal/external projects. So like I sort of envision this middle step as an intermediary where if I already have done it, that's great. I just need to click this final button. But if I don't have it, then this element is somewhat separate from quantified flu. Like I could have this already enabled or enable this for other projects, but it's not, it's required for this, but it also opens it up for other projects. So for me, I was unclear here of what the order is that I need to do things, where I was like, do I need to finish all these 4? Or I guess Connect Fitbit Intradate is the only one I could potentially do. But I was like, I have Fitbit connected, great. I don't need to do anymore, so I'll go here. So there was sort of confusion of the ties of this to here, and then this in relation to these in the project.
And I'm kind of a wordy person, so there's probably a way to do it without words, but I would like, my instinct would be to like draw a circle around that part and to say in all caps, you know, Quantified Flu is a project of Open Humans, you know, and, you know, have a little thing that says like data sources, Open Humans or whatever, you know, to participate in this project, authorize data sources via Open Humans. I mean, obviously that's like a million words, but somehow to kind of really try to communicate to people that Quantified Flu is here in the system, Open Humans is here, your data sources are here, and your activities are here. And
something like Quantified Flu can use data you've added to your Open Humans account.
Right.
Get very specific about how that data became accessible to Quantified Flu.
Mm-hmm.
That's an instinct, like just, you know, top of my head. I think we could kind of maybe do a little even group whiteboard or something.
Well, I'm looking forward to the discussion next week. Thank you. I mean, big thanks to Paula for going
Yeah,
through that and
definitely.
taking the notes. It's
Sure.
always nice to have a couple green ones that are that are positive.
Well, I think we should take heart from the fact that it actually works and it's complex. So this is like quite a complex set of things that goes all the way to like, you know, um, data use policies that are extremely hard to implement and understand. So I think at this point, it's about refining something that is, is operational.
Yeah, and well, and a lot of the feedback and refinements here are not specific to quantified flows. So it's a great sort of use case, but I know Morgan's listening in and like has project ideas, and they're going to benefit from us improving like this communication stuff.
This is useful stuff. It really is.
So I look forward to next week, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.